Ancient Egypt, a land of majestic pyramids, standing tall and proud against the backdrop of history. A land of glittering gold, where wealth and opulence were on full display. A land of powerful pharaohs, worshipped as gods on earth, their rule absolute and unchallenged. From the fertile banks of the Nile, a civilization blossomed, reaching heights of architectural and cultural achievement unparalleled in its time. The Nile was the lifeblood, nurturing the land and its people. But beneath this facade of splendor and sophistication lurked a dark truth, hidden from the grand narratives of history. A truth built on the backs of the enslaved, whose toil and suffering were the true foundation of Egypt's grandeur. A truth silenced by the lash of the whip, where voices of dissent were met with brutal force. A truth whispered in fear in the shadow of the pyramids, where the grandeur masked the grim reality. For all its grandeur, ancient Egypt was a society built on a foundation of oppression, where the few thrived at the expense of the many. A rigid hierarchy dictated every aspect of life, from birth to death, leaving little room for change or mobility. At the top stood the pharaoh, the absolute ruler, his word law, his power unquestioned. Below him, a privileged elite of priests and nobles basked in the glow of their proximity to power, enjoying luxuries and privileges. And at the very bottom, toiling under the scorching desert sun, were the enslaved masses, their lives marked by hardship and toil. They were the builders, the farmers, the laborers, the backbone of Egypt's prosperity, yet treated as little more than beasts of burden, their contributions largely unrecognized and unrewarded. Life for the enslaved in ancient Egypt was a living hell, a relentless cycle of suffering and despair. Every day brought backbreaking labor, from hauling massive stones for the pharaoh's grand monuments to toiling endlessly in the fields under the relentless scorching sun with no respite in sight. Their existence was one of constant fear, a fear that permeated every aspect of their lives. Fear of the overseer's whip, which could strike at any moment without warning. Fear of the arbitrary cruelty of their masters who wielded absolute power over them. Fear of the very system that held them captive, a system designed to break their spirits. They were denied even the most basic rights, stripped of their humanity and dignity. Their lives were not their own, bound by chains both physical and metaphorical. They were the property of the state, to be used and discarded at will, mere commodities in the eyes of their oppressors. Taxation was another cruel tool of oppression. Every harvest, every animal born, every meager possession was subject to the tax collector's insatiable greed, leaving them with barely enough to survive. Failure to pay meant beatings, imprisonment, or worse, a fate too terrible to contemplate. The legal system offered no refuge for the enslaved, no hope for justice or fairness. It was a system designed to protect the powerful, not dispense justice. Their voices were silenced, their cries for help unheard, their pleas for mercy ignored, their suffering dismissed as inconsequential. In the eyes of the Egyptian elite, they were less than human, mere tools to be exploited. They were tools, nothing more, their worth measured only by their ability to labor and serve. But even in the darkest of times, the human spirit yearns for freedom. It is an unquenchable flame that refuses to be extinguished, no matter how dire the circumstances. And so it was in Egypt, a land of grandeur and oppression, where the mighty pyramids stood as silent witnesses to the suffering of the enslaved. The enslaved, pushed to the brink of despair, began to stir. Their spirits, though battered, were not broken. Whispers of rebellion, carried on the desert wind, spread from the work camps to the fields. These whispers grew louder, fueled by the shared suffering and the collective hope for a better future. A shared anger, a burning desire for liberation, began to unite them. In their hearts, a spark of defiance was ignited, and it spread like wildfire. And from their midst arose a leader, a man named Moses, who would become the beacon of their hope and the voice of their struggle. Moses, raised in the pharaoh's palace, yet acutely aware of the plight of his people, heard their cries. He saw their suffering. He felt their pain. His heart ached for the injustice that his people endured, and he answered their call. With a heart full of courage and a spirit unyielding, he stepped forward to lead them. With unwavering conviction and a heart filled with righteous anger, Moses confronted the pharaoh. He stood tall, his voice unwavering, his resolve unbreakable. He demanded freedom for his people. He demanded their right to live with dignity and respect. He demanded an end to the tyranny. He demanded justice. And in that moment, the fires of rebellion were truly ignited, setting the stage for a monumental struggle for freedom. The pharaoh scoffed at Moses' demands. He refused to relinquish his grip on his human chattel. He would not be swayed by pleas for compassion or threats of divine retribution. And so, Moses, guided by a faith that burned brighter than the desert sun, led his people out of Egypt in a daring escape. The Exodus had begun. It was a perilous journey into the unknown, a journey fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the Israelites, as they were now known, were driven by a force more powerful than any obstacle, the burning desire for freedom. They faced down sandstorms and thirst. They evaded the pursuing Egyptian chariots. They endured hardship and loss. But through it all, their spirit never wavered. Their faith never faltered. They were free.